Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Dan Lynch joins me. We're going to talk about the Digital Public Library of America. No shushing, lots of information. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for FLOSS Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Dan Lynch. Episode 294, recorded May 14th, 2014. Digital Public Library of America. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the small projects, the projects you may be using every day and not be aware of it, the projects you might not have ever heard of now sound really cool and you want to go play with them. I have that happen on almost every show. It's so scary. Anyway, joining me today is once again Dan Lynch. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yeah, I guess we haven't done a show in 10 episodes, according to the way I had to update the show things this morning. So welcome back. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Liverpool, in England, and it's not quite as sunny and hot as where you are, but, you know, the sun is out today, so that's we take that as a win. We'll take that as a win. The sun is out today. It
is a rare occasion for what I've heard from people there in the UK area, London area. Well, the UK covers a lot of range. What am I saying? Yeah, it's like every place around. You know, us crazy Americans, we don't have any idea of the geography over there, so it's a little crazy. Oh, and I should also mention that I am speaking to you from Portland, Oregon, or near Portland, Oregon. I'm actually home for this week, and that's why it's the Blue Yeti and not the Blue Yeti Pro. I did bring my Fez this time, though, so for those of you that are always looking to see if I have my Fez, it's here. It's nearby. You saw it at the opening show anyway. Okay, so this isn't This Week in Geography, so we have a great show lined up today. We have the Digital Public Library of America, which has the shortest domain name I've ever seen, dp.la. That's pretty amazing. We've got two people representing the project. We've got Mark, I'm going to mispronounce this, Mark Matienzo and Mark Breedlove. So a couple of Marks today on the show, and they have various roles. Mark Matienzo is the Director of Technology for the DPLA, and Mark Breedlove is a technical specialist. We'll get them to describe what both of those mean. But as far as I can tell what it is, it's a meta index. They go through, and there's like tons and tons of stuff out on the net. That really good media that's available typically under Creative Commons licenses and things like that. But where do you go for your one-stop shopping? How do you find out that archive.org has it, or that maybe some like the Smithsonian's public information has it, or whatever? This thing apparently is sort of the meta index for all that. And of course, the marks will tell me if I got that one wrong. But what do you know about this so far, Dan?
I've just been having a look at they've got some really interesting platform stuff on there for developers, so it'd be good to ask them about that. It's not just a search engine, it's actually a platform with an API and all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, because we could just keep making up stuff all day, why don't we go ahead and bring on Mark Matienzo, and he can correct me if I pronounced his name wrong. Go ahead, sir.
Totally correct. Surprisingly.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, well, that was... I didn't even have to give you any sort of phonetic spelling. I realized that was on me for not doing that. So,
well,
so
great.
Good work.
Thank you. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking from New York City. I live in Brooklyn, and weather here is a little mild, but not too bad.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you in a second. Let's go ahead and also bring on Mark Breedlove. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello there. Hi.
Hi, and where are you speaking to us from?
Well, I'm calling from Boston, and it's been a little bit overcast, I suppose, sort of slightly English weather, but you know, it's sort of like it's been a little warm and then cold, warm, cold, whatever, you know. Yep. Waiting for it to turn officially spring here.
Yes, This Week in Geography and Weather. It's actually going to hit it's almost going to hit 90 here, which for May seems very unusual for Portland, and so I'm not looking forward to that. So yeah, so let's go back to Mark Matienzo. Give us sort of the overview of what the DPLA is and what your role is with it.
Sure. So the DPLA brings together materials that have been digitized in libraries, archives, and museums throughout the United States, and we make them freely available. So we really work to include basically all kinds of materials. We really specialize in cultural heritage materials, so things like scanned books or historic photographs, some scanned manuscript materials, and so forth. But we understand our mission to be pretty broad. And so part of what we're trying to do is make sure that materials are openly available and we improve the discovery of those materials. So basically, DPLA is built on a history over the last 20 years or so of digital library work in the United States. So building collections for online access to all sorts of materials that mostly research libraries have held. Part of the issue with that, though, is that this has often ended up in causing like sort of a degree of siloization that, you know, an individual institution might make their materials available online, but there's not an easy way to search across institutions. You know, there's been progress made, and I think generally speaking, people who are doing this digital library work understand the importance of doing this kind of cross-collection discovery. But what we really do is we give our users, and we give sort of users understood to be very broadly, the ability to search across a large index of multiple partners. We also provide a mechanism for developers to work with our data. We provide both bulk data and API access to our platform, which is basically our search index. We also do a fair amount of work in advocating for public option for intellectual property rights. So part of difficulty, I think, that libraries have had in the U.S. is that sort of the confusing nature of intellectual property law. So there's, you know, librarians tend to understand this very well, but still there's sort of a tendency to be rather risk averse. So I think what we're trying, one of the things that we're trying to do is really engage in education about intellectual property and make sure people understand sort of how they can apply licenses like Creative Commons licenses, or how we can better document right statements in a way to make them globally interoperable or understandable without sort of really focusing on the legalese, and sort of so people can really get to the point of what stuff can we reuse easily. What does it mean if a library doesn't provide a high resolution image? You know, are there any other limitations on usage that we might need to provide clearer guidance about? So my job is sort of broadly understood to be leading the technology vision for DPLA. So I'm sort of both a lead architect and sort of a blue sky thinker at the same time. I also do a lot of work trying to identify partnerships outside of DPLA. So one of the ways in which we operate, for example, is we bring in content through a network of hubs. So hubs are basically institutions that either large institutions that contribute a very, very large number of records to us, or institutions that aggregate on behalf of other institutions. So for example, the Minnesota Digital Library provides service to the entire state of Minnesota and hosts digital collections for them and provides some other services. So the hubs are the ways by which we get those materials and the way that and are basically the aggregation points for us. So part of what we're trying to do is develop sort of a technical network within the hubs and figure out, you know, what are the groups that we need to be that I need to sort of help foster collaboration between who are our industry partners, both in terms of sort of thinking about business opportunities, or what other open source projects should we be collaborating with or working on. So it's both a sort of a managerial, you know, upper level job, but also I still have to get my hands dirty and write some code and help out with deployments and things like that. So it's a good mix, but it's a hard balance.
Well, we're almost out of time. It's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, there was a lot. Sorry.
No, it's always great when our guests have obviously answered the question that I asked, the first or second question, so that they have the really nice long answers. And that was a wonderful answer. So many tidbits in there. Let's see, where am I going to start with that? I pretty much hit the nail on the head then about that you're unifying the knowledge about all the content from all these various repositories into one searchable index. What's that like? What's the process involved in making that happen?
I'll let Mark talk about that because
please.
he's actually been the one who's doing the most work on our end about that. So he probably can give some more up-to-date insight than I can.
Yeah, well,
go ahead then.
Well, it's definitely a team effort. So there's a lot of organizational sort of things that happen outside of my domain. But when it comes to me, there are various steps of aggregating the data which we get in files from our providers or in OAI PMH feeds. So basically, from HTTP endpoints from our providers, and taking that data, fetching it, munging it into our own format that we use and sticking it into a CouchDB database and having our search engine index it. So sort of a lot of moving parts, and we get a lot of there are a lot of differences between our different providers' data that require a lot of sort of different little modules for handling them individually. And just the process of we're kind of working on something that's moving as we're trying to keep improving it and adding to it and sort of fixing various parts. So it's definitely kind of an ongoing process. It's a very interesting study of doing this openly as well, because all of our code is out there on GitHub, and we've we're kind of like a startup of the nonprofit sector, So we sort of encountered a lot of the interesting sort of scaling issues that a lot of startups encounter, and a lot of the sort of like just process-related issues that a lot of startups encounter, but outside of that context of of a for-profit, we have actually a lot of interesting sort of similarities with like staffing and funding and stuff. But that's kind of beside the point. But it's been it's very much an ongoing process.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm curious, how many origin sources do you have then?
Let's see. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are, what are there, like 13? And a lot of these, again, are what we call hubs, where they're actually aggregating hundreds of, or maybe more of like little, smaller institutions or organizations, So we've got this huge variety of data coming at us. I'd say, like, supposing if my count is right, like 13, that's still that would still be sort of enough variety, between the different metadata formats that they give us.
We've got it turns out we've got 20 hubs.
Okay.
So, and as I sort of suggested when I was speaking, these hubs also, at least some of them, aggregate material for other institutions. A good example of this is, so you have an institution like the New York Public Library or the Smithsonian Institution. There are other departments or there are other sort of subunits within that organization that are contributing content. But then you've got something like Minnesota Digital Library or the Mountain West Digital Library or HathiTrust, which is basically the cooperative nonprofit that maintains the long-term responsibility for books scanned in the Google Books project. So they collect and aggregate content for lots of different organizations already. So we've got 20 hubs, and it's something like Across those 20 hubs, we're aggregating content for 1,100 individual institutions or individual sort of subunits of those institutions.
Wow, that's a lot. What about the problem of identity? If two different organizations have the same item, how do you tell that it's the same?
That's a good question. That's a good question. We haven't solved that
That's
yet.
an interesting. Yeah, that's one of those things that we've kind of. It's just kind of there as something to tackle. The quick answer is we don't really check for that. Most of the content that we're getting is original stuff like archival materials. There are obviously cases where there's an actual publication of some kind that the two institutions will have, but it's not at the moment as great an issue as you might think. I mean, Mark can probably speak to that. But one interesting thing in the future would be to do something like, either through natural language processing or something like that, to try to figure out which items are about the same thing, to sort of like determine the aboutness of something. It's something we've kind of discussed but haven't really gotten into yet.
I mean, you talked a bit about resources there and the scaling and so on. I was curious to know, obviously you've got all these hubs, you've got all this stuff coming in. How many people are actually working on the core project though? You've got you two guys, obviously. Who else is there? What's your team kind of look like?
Mostly us two.
Okay.
There was a team. We've got some contractors who continue to work for us. And for example, there's one other guy who works on the ingest code, and two others who work on sort of DevOps things. But it's really maybe 1, 2, 3 people touching the ingestion code, and yeah. And in the past, when the organization, this was before my time, but when the organization was starting out, there were I guess a few more contractors working on it. But really, it's a very small staff, so we have to wear a lot of hats.
We're a very
and what about contributing from the contributions from the community, for example? Because you mentioned your code's on GitHub and so on. So is it mainly you guys that are contributing to the code right now? Do you get many patches coming in, or do you get other people chipping in?
At this point, not so much. So we've gotten a little bit of feedback from people in the community about some of the things that we've been doing. We tend to get a lot of, I think, bigger picture questions or bigger picture guidance about sort of, when we're facing a particular problem. But on occasion we'll get a pull request from somebody, who, for example, who works at one of our hubs because they'll notice an issue with the API. Or, recently we've been having some conversations with a couple of the hubs. One is Minnesota Digital Library. The other is a new partner with us, California Digital Library, about collaborating on these ingest tools, because it sounds like one of the things that we've discovered is that there are really not too many tools that I think we really like or feel like are easy to deploy and easy to maintain to do the type of work we do when we're ingesting metadata and cleaning it up. So we're trying to figure out how to collaborate. We've been looking at either trying to start a new project or seeing if we can leverage an existing project to do that. It's still very, very early days, but I think once we sort of move towards that, we'll start to see a lot more collaborative development. There are other parts of our stack. So, for example, on our front end, we have this bookshelf user interface, and that was actually originally developed by a research group at Harvard, and called the Library Innovation Lab. And so, they let us incorporate that into our front end code, which is again also available on GitHub. And so I think one of the things that we're really, really interested in doing is seeing if there are, if the community finds ways to do things with our API visualizations. If we can come up with some sort of, agreement, a license which is mutually agreeable, or terms of use which are mutually agreeable, where we can start to incorporate those into our front end. I think the other thing is that we sort of don't, we just sort of like to let people sort of start working with the API and see what they come up with, and get feedback about our API as well.
And that's a great segue into the next kind of question, really. So, I mean, you've got this platform, you've got the API, and so on. What kind of interesting things are people doing with it right now? I mean, what are the things that you've seen people doing that you think, wow, I never would have thought of that, or what a great use of the tool?
Sure. So there are all sorts of things. So we actually just recently had our first anniversary, and one of the developers who used our API had his project featured in the New York Times Art Beat blog post about the DPLA anniversary, which is it's a bot called Twitter bot called Historical Cats, which just basically searches for terms like cat or kitten in DPLA and automatically post links.
Because it's so hard to find cat pictures on the net. It really,
on the internet,
I don't know where you're going to find those.
Properly sourced historical cat pictures. That's a big void. So
old cats.
So it's things like that. There was actually a hackathon recently at a conference in Texas called, I think it's the Texas Conference on Digital Libraries. And there were a number of interesting projects that came out of that. One was sort of a Node.js Socket.io, sort of like a screensaver, which, basically you've got a web app where you can you connect to one interface on your phone and do a search and select images that load automatically on another page, and sort of gives you like a nice presentation and a level of interactivity that we don't currently have. There have been a number of map-based visualizations. There are things like search widgets. There's an iOS app called OpenPix, which allows you to search across DPLA and other sources. So it's a lot of it really, they tend to break down into either doing some sort of visualization or helping to guide the search a little bit. One of the more recent apps that somebody developed that we were pretty impressed to see, and we got a lot of feedback in terms of what we needed to change on our end, was something called Find DPLA, which is a user script for Wikipedia that allows you to search for related text and images in DPLA when you're looking at a specific Wikipedia article. So, and part of what the developers did with this is they realized that maybe from time to time the title of the article doesn't exactly match. So I believe they're pulling in the data from disambiguation pages if it's available, to help bring sort of more likely results together for people who are looking for this sort of stuff.
And you mentioned your stack and so on, and I heard Mark mention CouchDB before. So I'm curious to know what you're doing in the back end here with all this stuff. So
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about how it all? Well, I was going to say stacks up. Is that a really bad pun? Can you tell us about how it all fits together in the back there?
Sure. So our backend primary data store is CouchDB. We're also using Elasticsearch for our search index. All of our ingestion code is Python. Our platform layer, which is the API layer, talks to both the search index and to CouchDB. It's Ruby on Rails. The front end is also Ruby on Rails, and that talks directly to our API and uses a Postgres database for some other things. We are using an application called Omeka, which is a PHP web application to build pivots, and we're using WordPress for a content management system. So on top of that, we're using things like Nginx to sort of as a proxy mechanism to bring everything together. Specifically with CouchDB, we're using the Big Couch fork, which allows us to have a sharded instance, which works in most cases pretty nicely for us.
Wow, that's a lot of interesting, good open source technologies. Have you had any sort of bugs and everything that you could send back upstream, or is everything just working sort of out of the box for you?
I'll let Mark answer that.
Yeah,
We've just been talking about something recently. So.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, yeah, most of the issues we've had are things that we need to fix in our own ingestion code. Since I've started in January, I've been working mostly with ingestion, so that's what I can speak to best. But recently. There seems to be something that an upcoming version of Big Couch will probably fix, that we ran into just trying to jam huge amounts of. I'm sorry, I was actually trying to jam huge amounts of data into CouchDB, but occasionally, I guess we have some things we're still trying to diagnose with that. But we've also got some fairly humongous views that we have to query, and so we found this is where I'm talking about. There's something that they probably got fixed in an upcoming release. So we're kind of waiting to see how that pans out. But the cool thing about that, I'll have to say, is that in order to diagnose this particular problem, I was obviously able to go into their code and examine the stack traces I was getting in our error logs, and go and really find out what the problem was and find out if it was something that I could solve, by, say, tweaking the Big Couch configuration, or if it was something that I would, have to file a ticket for or whatever. Like, I could actually go into the code and check that. So that's one reason why it's so wonderful to use an open piece of software like this. It's Big Couch is it's relatively new compared to like Postgres or something like that. So it's still got things that they're kind of working on, but you can go and troubleshoot things, much better than you could with a closed sort of product, Yeah.
So, and sadly, I
yeah.
was distracted when you were listing all the different technologies. I overheard a couple of keywords, but I was busy trying to install that pick search program on my iOS phone here, so it's just about installed. So I was a little distracted. What are you using for configuration management for systems? You probably have a number of systems. So how do you manage configuration?
Yeah. Well, currently that's done with Puppet. I'm actually looking at Ansible for doing this, because my interest is in for development, moving more of our development off of cloud servers and into VMs, like with VirtualBox and Vagrant and Ansible. Yep. And my goal is to actually have this Ansible configuration checked into a repository where we can actually share that with people who want to get on board with our software and sort of spool it up themselves, and actually have the same basic configuration, like minus the private sort of variables, installation specific variables, have, basically use the idea is to use the same configuration in development for your dev servers as you would in production, but just like certain things related to scaling and tuning and private stuff that you have separate, to have as reliable as possible a development environment, and to be able to share it like this, to be able to say, here, just go to GitHub, download this, and then run Vagrant up, and it'll create your servers for you or whatever, So that's where we're headed. We're still working on that.
Currently, I think the other thing that I would add about that is that one of the limitations of our stack right now is that it's really still mostly kind of in our heads and in the heads of our contractors that we've been working with. So even though it's open source, it's still necessarily not easy to get up and running. So the other motivation for this is to make sure that we as a team understand the stack and we sort of collectively, knowing that we'll still, we have another developer starting in a couple of weeks, but we're going to stay small for the time being, and any of us need to be able to step in. So if we can be confident that we can spin up a new instance on our local machine, then it should be easier for us to spin up a new node whenever we need. So part of it is, this is our chance to really get a better understanding of what we have in place already. And, so we can then make it easier to have people start to use what our same infrastructure as well.
Yeah, and I'll just put in my word for it too, since one of my clients I've been working with for a number of years, and he only has 5 hosts in the cloud, but 2 of them are supposed to be, high availability redundant. And so I've been manually installing configs on one and then having to remember to update. And it's just been a real mess. And so we've actually been moving towards putting salt on all those. And it's been a lot of fun trying to figure out every little thing I've ever configured on these boxes and put them into a central Git repository that Salt reads from. But it's actually been rewarding because it gives him peace of mind because, the old, you don't want to be irreplaceable. You don't want to be irreplaceable. You want to have the whole hit by a bus issue out of the way for continuity of business for him. And so it's been fun sort of working it out. I don't know if we're going to spin up anything from scratch, but my goal actually this week is to get it so every single config file that I've ever edited on these machines would be written in Salt somewhere, so at least we can know where to change things from. So did you consider Salt at all, or did you go straight from Puppet to Ansible?
No, I mean, a few people recommended Ansible to me at a meetup group that I had gone to. It was basically a word of mouth sort of situation, and I liked the fact that it didn't require a central server, and I just liked the YAML configuration of it. I'm still open to testing out other things because we're at an early stage of this. So yeah, I mean, I have to say, just digging into this has been really a great exercise just for learning a lot more about Big Couch and some of the other software. You're really sort of forced to get in there and really learn about it. It's a fantastic exercise if you are able to do it.
I also noticed on the site it says a staff of 4 to nearly 10, and I'm wondering if does that mean 9.5? I never know what people mean.
I don't recall that particular. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah,
we're hiring for 2 more positions right now. So right now we actually have 7 staff members. The two of us, and 5 other people. We have 1 more starting soon. We have 2 positions that we're actively hiring for right now. So hopefully by the fall we will be 10 people. I think that's what that means.
Yeah, just like the nearly 10. It's like almost 10. We just can't count this guy fully quite yet.
That last person's just a huge space cadet. We just kind of is there like half.
It's not like a highly trained dog or a helper monkey or something. You count as
a mascot, right?
Half a person.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was amused when I saw that, so I wanted to bring that into the show. So why is this the DPLA America? Why is this not also scanning things around the world?
So that's a good question. We were actually inspired by another project called Europeana, which is basically sort of a pan-European initiative to do something very similar. So we do have sort of counterpart projects like Europeana in other countries. There's a project called Trove in Australia, which is run by the National Library of Australia. There's a project called Digital NZ, or Digital New Zealand, as you might imagine in New Zealand. And so, we've got a pretty great network of sort of large-scale digital libraries, or national or international digital libraries, that are a good community of practice. I think by comparison, you will find that each of these projects or organizations vary differently in size. Europeana, in comparison to us, is absolutely huge. I think they've got something like over 50 employees. And so their tech stack looks totally different. Their ability to do a lot of sort of things that we're not able to do is significant in comparison. But we're all interested in working together. We do have regular check-in calls with each other, either on focused topics like technology or data modeling, or even sort of broader things like outreach and strategic planning. So, we've had some discussions. I know there is somewhat of a similar project in Canada as well, and there's been some discussion about whether there can be something closer to Canada or closer to DPLA in Canada, or whether at some point we can bring on Canadian partners. It's really too early for us to say whether that's a possibility, but I think we found that this, generally speaking, it's international collaboration is hard, and I think the compromise that we're willing to make on that right now is really in terms of the technology and the software piece. So, for example, we're looking at a couple other projects that some of the other large-scale national or international digital libraries have been working on, and seeing if they'll end up being able to work with our stack as well.
Well, yeah, I'm sort of curious about that then, because you have all these different places where content is. You essentially have the meta problem now. Is there an opportunity for syndication so that we can actually search one place and have it search to all 7 libraries that you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, actually, there's been, I know this has happened at least in a focused way. So all of these sort of large-scale digital libraries that exist already expose APIs. Unfortunately, we don't have sort of a common agreement yet about what those APIs should look like, so that might be an interesting future step. But there was, for the anniversary of the start of World War I believe Europeana has like a special, sort of a special focused site on World War I that allows you to search across Europeana, DPLA, Trove, Digital New Zealand, and I believe also Canadiana, which is the Canadian project that I was speaking about before. Okay,
cool. By the way, I just searched for cat on the picture thing there. So yes, there's pictures of cats available through the interface. That's nice. See what's
historical cats.
Historical cats, yes. And there's you can't see it because my screen's going crazy here. But anyway, yeah. So there, the iOS app works really nicely. Thank you. I want a picture of a cat. I know where to go. Yeah. Awesome. So now I, of course, completely lost my train of thought of what I was going to ask next. Dan, you got a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a bit about, I was looking on your website there about some of the outreach stuff that you're doing. Something less on the techie side now, since we've got quite heavily into that, which I love. But yeah, something about the community stuff. You said, I was looking at your community reps program and the fact that you're looking for people to be community reps. Do you want to get on the soapbox and tell us a bit what that's about and why you need people to get involved? I don't know which one of you wants to go for that, but feel free.
Mark's the best one for that.
Okay, I'll do that one. So the community reps program is it's basically a volunteer program that allows people to help spread the word about DPLA. And so the idea is that there are parts of the country either in which we don't have an existing relationship, or it's sort of, the U.S. is obviously so large that if we can find people to help spread the word to their local communities about DPLA, then the DPLA will be more representative of the United States as a whole. So the reps program basically is if people are enthusiastic or interested about open access, digital collections, the potential of a national digital library, interested in history, if you work in education, any of these things are great areas for outreach. So the expectation of the community reps program is that the reps will organize at least one activity which will promote DPLA as a portal platform or an advocate for the public option. So in doing that, we provide promotional materials, both in terms of sort of ready-made things like slides to give presentations, in addition to things like stickers and T-shirts and mugs and other sort of merchandise that you can use as giveaways, that they communicate back with us about those outreach activities, particularly in terms of things like blog posts, group notes, if you collect social media using Storify or some other tool like that. Checking in with DPLA staff about the progress and sharing experiences through an email list that we have in place, and collaborating with DPLA staff and other reps to plan new outreach activities. From time to time, there's also the potential for a rep to participate in an event or a speaking opportunity, one that we can't get to ourselves, or that we can only have limited participation in, for example. So this hackathon in Texas that I spoke about, which is at the end of April, we had our executive director, Dan Cohen, was there. But one of our community reps really did the majority of the work in terms of organizing the hackathon. So, it's really open to anybody who's interested in spreading the word or trying to figure out how they can help DPLA. It's not understood to be a position about soliciting content for DPLA, though. So it's really, those are such sort of labor-intensive relationships that it really requires dedicated staff time. So the community reps are sort of, we encourage people to be creative and think about ways in terms of, if they can find a way to be excited about coming up with some sort of activity, and they get a lot of bonus points if it's a collaborative activity that they're doing with other reps. So I know that a couple of reps, for example, are in the process of thinking about doing another hackathon, and so we're really interested in particular to see if we can have something, if the reps program is a good fit for people who are interested in technology or interested in I'm not really sure either way, but I think I would definitely be interested in getting feedback. If people who are software developers are interested in working with the DPLA, is the API enough? Sort of what other feedback can we get about sort of what would help? What would you want from us as a collaborator? Do you just want to start trying to experiment with our code or our platform, or do you really, is there some other sort of partnership that people are thinking about?
And you mentioned events there, and the fact that the community reps are organising events. I was looking at, you've got a DPLA Fest. Festival kind of conference thing going on. There doesn't seem to be any information about this year. There's information about last year. Is there anything coming up this year? Can you tell us anything about that?
We don't have one coming up this year, but we are scheduling one for 2015, and I don't remember the exact dates, but it sounds like we've scheduled something for April 2015. So it's about a year out. I think for us, these are events. They're such large scale events. I think there was something like 700 or 800 people at the 2013 DPLA Fest. So they're so large scale, and we're such a small staff that we don't really have the luxury of being able to have them every year yet.
Mm-hmm. And possibly something the community reps could get involved with as well, I imagine, and other people helping to organize that kind of stuff. I'm curious a bit about. Sorry, I'm stepping on you there, but I was curious a bit about the funding of the organisation. I've had a look at. You've got a big list of funders on there. Obviously, you mentioned you've got what was it, 9.5 staff or whatever it was, I forget. These people need to be funded, and obviously you got infrastructure stuff and so on. So, can you tell us a little bit about the funding of the organisation? You're set up as a charity, I'm imagining, and all of that.
Yes, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So at this point, the majority of our funding comes from foundations and government agencies. So, for example, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the National Endowment for Humanities, and the Arcadia Fund. So, we also have some other private donors that have been very generously contributing money to us. I think we're definitely interested in coming up with a sustainability plan. So actually, part of our funding that we're getting from the Mellon Foundation is to figure out what we can do, sort of to investigate different sustainability models, and are there particular services that we can provide to the community that will help us sustain our operations, or are there is there some sort of sponsorship or membership model that say an institution like a large research library could show their commitment to DPLA by paying a certain amount a year to become a member. I think at this point, nothing is really off the table. We're actually, one of the positions we're hiring for is this business development director. So feel free to look at our website, and if you're interested and you feel like you're qualified, certainly you're welcome to apply.
Excellent. And you actually answered some of the things I was going to ask you now. I was going to ask about membership, maybe as a some pay so much a month to be a member or a supporter or something. That seems like something that could. It sounds like I'm pitching for the job here. I'm giving you suggestions. It's a live job interview. So something else I wanted to ask about was we've talked a lot about your codes on GitHub and so on, and you were saying about getting other people to use it and integrating stuff back in. What license is it under, and what kind of influenced that choice?
A lot of our code is under the Affero GPL. I believe part of the choice of that was really, I think, so some of the history of the project is that the project started as a planning initiative based at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. And I think that I only started last December, so in a lot of cases, the license was already in place after I had started. So my understanding is that was, they basically felt that was the best fit for a lot of our code. With some of the projects, so for example, with Omeka, this exhibition software that we've been using, I believe Omeka is released under GPL3. So any of the plugins that we've developed for Omeka, I've been just saying, if we're using an open source product that has a specific license, we should just continue to release any enhancements under that same license, just sort of for the sake of making it easy. I think we're not necessarily philosophically opposed to looking at other licenses. There are portions of our code that are licensed under the MIT license, for example. I think in general, as we're looking to potentially adopt other open source projects or contribute to other open source projects, that may end up impacting which license we do. We continue to release code. So I don't anticipate us, retroactively, relicensing anything that we've built out. But I know for example, some projects that we've been looking at are released under Apache 2.0, and if it makes sense to use that for for a specific project, then I think that's fine.
Cool. Hey, I've got a couple of questions. I mean, we talked a lot about the project itself, but I want to look at it from the end user perspective just for a couple minutes.
Sure.
So you're getting all this data, all this metadata about all these available resources, including the licensing, if available, things like that, and URL locations for them, and whatever other metadata there are. Do you have end users searching directly on the DPLA site, and what does it look like? What can I ask for? Can I ask for a movie that's greater than 30 minutes in length?
Not yet. What you can, because actually we don't really have that level of granularity yet. So, basically what you can do is you can do keyword searching. There's faceted browsing. So either within an existing search or in starting afresh, you can filter or refine by the format. So, for example, if something is image, text, sound, moving image, so forth, you can filter by the contributing institution, the partner or hub that we receive. There's the ability to filter by date, by language. When we have subject headings or geographic information, you can also filter by location. So in addition to that, we also provide a visualization, like you can see search results plotted on a map, or you can see a timeline representation, which indicates the date of creation or publication. And then there's this bookshelf browse, which I mentioned briefly earlier.
Cool. And so then from there, so I could actually get lots of useful data directly from your site. From there, you said there's also an API. Do you have a JSON-P interface to that so I can embed it in my web pages?
Yes, I believe that any of our API requests can take a callback parameter, so you should just be able to use that. And I believe that's what some of the apps that people have contributed use already.
So if I wanted to say a little stream of Stonehenge pictures alongside my Stonehenge.com site, I could probably put those there.
Mm-hmm.
That probably wouldn't be very difficult. Yeah, I mean, assuming we have many Stonehenge pictures because we're Library of America, but you never know. Maybe there's something in the Smithsonian or something like that.
Or we'll end up with Carhenge, because that always comes up with America's Stonehenge is Carhenge. So I've seen it before.
Yeah.
You actually ended up piquing my curiosity about that, Randall. So I ended up doing a search, and it seems like we've got a bunch of images from the New York Public Library Arents collection, which is tobacco paraphernalia or something like that.
What?
But they're cigarette cards. They're these sort of images that are included in packs of cigarettes. So
wow, that's amazing. I'm just looking and seeing. I've got through almost everything I wanted to get through, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to let us know anything that we haven't asked yet that you want to make sure our audience is aware of. Either of you.
Mark?
Wow. Gee, okay, so I'm sort of on the spot here.
Sorry.
Well, let's see. Maybe I should that we haven't already covered.
Yeah, that's the hard
I'm not
part.
used to being.
Remember back the last 30 minutes, see what we covered.
Yeah. I'm
Subtract that out.
Playing the tape back here. Let's see. It's.
What kind of people are you looking for? What kind of people are you looking for in terms of volunteering? Not necessarily on staff, but what sort of things do you need help with in terms of contribution to the project?
Yeah. Well, let's see. We're always looking for people to help, QA and that sort of thing. It's kind of usually we want to sort of form a relationship with someone. I think before we don't just randomly do like QA. It's we sort of we've like. I'm not putting this the best way. I don't know.
QA, you need QA, right?
But like the part of the whole notion of community reps, I think, I don't know if I'm speaking out of place, is that it could potentially lead to good relationships with people who can provide useful feedback, either not literally either QA, but not necessarily literally QA, but just sort of kind of the way you would do sort of like focus panel sort of testing, that sort of thing. We haven't necessarily done that yet, but that's just something I've been thinking about. So I don't know if I'm like speaking out of place on that, but basically, we meet people at hackathons. We have relationships with people that we meet at hackathons and who we correspond with periodically, and those are sort of those have been very, very useful for just getting feedback on our API Met some people at an ALA hackathon in Philadelphia who gave me a lot of useful feedback on issues they were encountering, searching date ranges and things like that. So our ability to attend hackathons and to just sort of reach people through other events is very important. Something that we do. We get a lot from those contacts, and our community reps program could theoretically feed us more people like that.
Cool. And given also, sorry, go ahead.
And I think there's also what we're looking for. I mean, specifically with community reps, is I think if people see a natural confluence of some community that they're working with already, or a community that they know about, and that would have some sort of good overlap with DPLA, then I think that's there's a great opportunity to do that, to have those conversations and figure out how we can work together. So for example, it's really early days, but I've been having some conversations with some folks involved in the Mozilla community, and trying to figure out, is there a good way for us to work together with Mozilla or the Mozilla Foundation? Sort of what sort of things are they doing? For example, I found out just from having like a half an hour or 45-minute conversation with a few people that Mozilla has its own reps program, and it's not exactly the same, but the similarities, there's some pretty strong similarities. So I think we, as terrifying as it might be, the reality is we are a startup, and so we're looking for great ideas. We're looking for people who are excited about what we're doing, and who see connections that we might not see. So having that kind of feedback is really, really critical.
Cool. And I have another question that I hope doesn't stump you. But given that your funding is U.S. based, and your scope is U.S. based, but there is an ever increasing Latino population, have you thought about internationalizing this stuff, or have you already done that?
We've had talks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we've had some conversations about that. We actually have we had a staff meeting last week, and one of the tickets we've been asked to reprioritize is on doing localization of translation and localization of the interface. So as soon as we've got a little bit of spare cycles to do that, we do have, as I said, we have a new developer who's starting very, very soon, who's and stuff for us to start. So obviously people speak other languages than English in the U.S., and they speak other languages than Spanish too. So I think that's we just need to figure out what sort of an initial pass in terms of translation is going to look like. But I'm really excited about that project because it'll really make the site that much more accessible for people across the U.S.
Do you have the language in the metadata that you're getting and collected?
Yes, we do. So you could, find all of our documents in Spanish and a variety of other languages. It's just a matter of our user interface having I18N or whatever
and I've heard once you get the second language done, the third language is much easier because everything's all already formulated out. Just a matter of dropping text in.
And that would be an interesting call for volunteers, as a matter of fact, just people to translate. That would be a good example of using our network of representatives, or just maybe people from making an announcement at a conference or something like that. When it comes time for us to spend the cycles to do that, we can draw upon our community perhaps for providing the translations.
Great. Okay, like I said, we're almost out of time, and I'm not going to ask again if there's anything we haven't covered because I don't want to stump you guys one more time. But I do have two questions that if I don't ask it, my people email me all day long saying, why didn't you ask your two required questions? We'll start with Mark Matienzo. What is your favorite scripting language, if you're any kind of a programmer?
I I would have to go with Ruby.
Okay.
I have my hands in Python most of the time. But it's either Python or Ruby.
Okay, and your favorite text editor?
Well, it depends on the context. I use Sublime Text when I'm on my desktop, or I use Vim when I'm logged into a server.
A common set of answers for that one. I don't get any wins on Emacs anymore. Okay, Mark, we love same two questions.
I've been through like so many different editors. I've been through, Emacs and VI. I still, I'm still adept at them. I still actually use VI a lot lately for my desktop. Like Mark, I've been using Sublime Text because of various, conveniences it provides. I used Eclipse for a while, but it's just kind of big and heavy, and I had issues with that sort of bloat, frankly. And so don't really use that anymore. Scripting language, currently, I'm just really, I'm enjoying Python. I kind of grew up on, well, I'm not grew up on, but like, I've used Perl a ton. I sort of, in a way, grew up on your Camel book there. And that was, hugely important. Perl and sort of that book and the way that book talked about sort of the whys and wherefores and the sort of CS kind of, things was really influential. But mostly in my past, it's been Perl and Python. And Python's great for a lot of the ingestion stuff we're doing with some of its things. Not that we've fully utilized this, but things like generators and list comprehensions and stuff like that.
Cool.
And I like its style. Like it has a definite worldview. That's one interesting thing about Python is it does have its opinions about things. So let's see, what was the other question in addition?
Editor. You said it already. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, editor and scripting languages. Yeah,
you covered it.
Yeah.
You covered it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And given your bent towards Python, though, I would really suggest once again taking a look at Salt, because Salt is YAML and Python all the way top to bottom.
Excellent.
Great.
Excellent. I will have a look at that then. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely,
you.
definitely. They've been on our show a couple times, and I'm using it personally now because of that, because I really was inspired by that, and I didn't want to learn Ruby, so I kind of had to go that direction. Well, Mark and Mark, it's been great having the two of you on the show. A lot of people now have found out about DPLA, and we'll probably be looking into it. Maybe you get some volunteers to do some of that translation when it becomes time, and thanks for being on the show.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
That was Mark Matienzo, the Director of Technology, and Mark Breedlove, who is a technical specialist for the Digital Public Library of America. What do you think, Dan?
A really, really interesting project. And it seems it's quite a young project by the sound of it, so lots of scope to develop here, I think. But their tools are really nice, actually. I was looking through some of their developer tools and stuff. Seems like they're going in a really nice direction with that. And the visualizations are very cool as well. Things like the timeline and the bookshelf and all these other things, and you can find historical cats. So, what's not to like?
I'm sure if somebody was redoing the Broadway show Cats and they needed some historical cats to put up on the banner, they could use those.
Yeah,
and,
maybe.
Yeah, cool. And I of course, I didn't think about the fact that Stonehenge is in the UK when I was thinking about looking for Stonehenge, given this is just the US. So, and I'm gonna have to go over to the one in Europe and see if it's got some Stonehenge pictures over there, and maybe they've got an API that I can put up on my website when I finally edit my website again for the next time. I suffer from the shoemaker's children. My website is horrible for StonehengeCon. Please don't go there and don't complain about how ugly it looks. I have not touched it in a long time, and it's out of date. It doesn't mention Dart. It doesn't mention all the things I'm currently working on or anything like that. And you wouldn't believe the chaos that's on the inside of it. So I am not a very good example of making good websites, but I build websites for other people all the time. Imagine that. No, I like this too. I like that it's metadata, so you can go to One Stop Shopping and go to their 30 hubs and the hundreds of sites that those are actually aggregating from. I wonder how much code they actually share between the hubs. I mean, because all those hubs got to talk to all their other little minions. It's got to be, some way to share the information on that. But I don't know. Anything else before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I'd encourage everyone to check it out, and if you're interested, become a community rep or get involved.
Cool. Yes, exactly. I always suggest that all the time. Let's see here. So we have some upcoming guests still for Q2. Q2 is almost full, though, and I'm going to open up Q3 real soon. Next week, we have X2Go, which I understand is essentially, if you're familiar with VNC, where you have a screen that represents a remote screen on another machine, you probably know that it's bandwidth hungry. It really wants to have a lot of data to go between the two machines. X2Go is apparently the equivalent of VNC, but on bandwidth challenge connections. They figured out some ways to make X not quite so chatty. They do more dirty area detection and delta sending and things like that. So that should be pretty interesting. Available for all platforms, apparently. And the Bro Network, Bro Network Security Monitor, which seems to be a fairly mature. Yeah, Bro can take care of you. Your bro is going to be watching. Bro is going to be watching your network for you. So we'll get those guys on talking about that. Buddy Cloud, which is a sort of an infrastructure to add to your websites for chat and file sharing and social activity. So they have open source solutions. They also have platform solutions so that you can just add that to your particular website. And Tonika, rounding out what we have scheduled so far for Q2, is a platform for social networks. I wonder if they use Buddy Cloud. Interesting. Well, so think of Tonika as sort of an open source Facebook, Foursquare, that sort of thing. So basically social networks. Again, Q2 is almost full. Be opening Q3 soon. If you go to twit.tv/floss, which is the homepage for this site, you can get more information, including the big spreadsheet that tells me too what's coming up, and also what we're looking at, who we're thinking about talking to. And if you have a project that is not on that list, please have them email me, merlin@stonehenge.com, and I will put them on as soon as I can, as soon as there's an opening in the schedule. You can follow us on Floss Weekly on Google+. I post a couple of messages there at least every week, including the upcoming guests and new guests as I get them on the slot. People seem to respond to that a lot, so that's kind of nice that people are following me there. You can also go to Floss Weekly on Twitter and follow us there, although I don't post anything directly. That's all just links to Google+. We do have a live chat. I don't think we took any questions from this particular week's live chat, but we were watching just in case somebody had a question there. That's at live.twit.tv at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, typically, unless we're bumped for some reason. You can follow me on Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N, on Twitter, but that's mostly just a link dump because most of my original content comes on Google+. That's Randall L. Schwartz on Google+. In terms of my travel schedule, I'm currently in Portland. I'm going to hang out here for another couple of days and back down to Santa Monica area for a while. But a month from now, for those of you who are in the UK, including you, Dan, I am going to be in London, June 11th and 12th and the 23rd. Those 3 evenings are free. I have nothing scheduled yet, but I want to put together a Floss Weekly meetup of some kind. For the 11th and 12th, I'll actually be sort of in the, I don't know if downtown makes any sense. It's all big. I don't even know what's close to, so I can't even tell you what area of London it is. But I'm sure there's tubes nearby. Okay, that's all I know. On the 23rd, I'll actually be out at the airport, so a little bit further away out at Heathrow. So I don't know what's going to be the best for people to be able to get to. Probably the one that's going to be downtown, so or closer to the city core, whatever it is. Anyway, so more about that later as I get things a little more organized for that. Otherwise, just follow me on those social media things, and you can find out what I'm doing. Dan, almost out of time, but do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I do actually. I have something rather special I want to plug at the moment. I haven't talked about it massively on this show, essentially, but I'm doing an album at the moment. I play guitar in a band, and we did a Kickstarter campaign to fund our album. Then that was like 18 months ago. It's taken us this long. It turns out it takes a while to make an album, so or make one that's worth listening to, I suppose. So we're just finishing it now, and it's due for release this weekend. So if you want to find out more about that, you can go to my own website, danlynch.org. The band's called 20 Pound Sounds. You can find us there. It'll be on Bandcamp. It's going to be under Creative Commons, so have a listen to it, see what you think. In the meantime, you can find all the other links to all my social media stuff on danlynch.org, and come and say hello and let me know what you think if you do have a listen to the album.
And if you want timely news, listen to Dan and Fab on Linux Outlaws.
Yeah,
that's for the. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say Monday nights, but it's not Monday nights anymore. It's Tuesday nights again. We keep changing nights, but if you get the podcast feed, I suppose it doesn't really matter because you'll get it when it comes out. But yeah, have a look at the website or Google or search for Linux Outlaws.
Well, I hear the music coming up behind me, so we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.